I'm going to show you how to get the best possible recordings of your Zoom presentations that will give you a much better result than using Zoom's built-in recording. And stick around to the end for a bonus tip for how to include your remote Zoom participants in the recording as well. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. I've had to do a lot of Zoom presentations over the last couple of years for obvious reasons. At first, I tried the built-in Zoom recording feature. But even with a good camera and microphone, that gives you a result that looks, but more importantly sounds like this, which is not exactly a professional result. It's really only acceptable for recording internal meetings, and this is not something I would post to YouTube later. When I'm presenting at a live virtual conference, I want to be live in Zoom, but also have a good quality recording to post to YouTube later. So let's go through this step by step to build up this virtual presentation recording kit. The two main devices that make this all work are the RØDE Streamer X and the Magewell Director Mini. I want to quickly mention the unique features of these that make this whole thing work. The Streamer X is a lot more than just an HDMI capture card with an XLR mic input. It actually has the ability to make multiple submixes of the different audio sources, and that's what will let us record your mic and the computer's Zoom output, but not send the Zoom audio back into Zoom. The Magewell Director Mini is the smallest video switcher that can take two HDMI sources and scale and crop them into a side-by-side layout. You can use any XLR mic and any camera with clean HDMI out. For this video, I'll use the RØDE PodMic and the LUMIX BGH1. Now, an optional addition to this kit is the Elgato prompter, which means you'll be able to read from your slides or see your Zoom meeting while looking straight into the camera to maintain eye contact. So let's get this all connected up, starting with the video. Start by connecting your computer to the HDMI 2 on the Director Mini. Your computer will see it as an external display, and now you can either mirror or extend your computer screen to the Magewell Director Mini. If you do use it as a separate screen, you can use your laptop screen for notes, and then you can connect an external monitor to this through USB-C to HDMI if you want to see that screen larger. Now, instead of connecting your camera to the Director Mini like you normally would, you're actually going to connect your camera to the HDMI input of the Streamer X. And that way you can bring just your camera into the Zoom meeting. I've already got my camera connected to the Streamer X, so Zoom is seeing the full camera feed here from the Streamer X. Now to get your camera into the Magewell Director Mini, connect to the HDMI output of the Streamer X into the HDMI 1 on the Director Mini. The HDMI out of the Streamer X is a pass-through, so that brings your camera feed directly into the Director Mini. Next, let's set up the audio. So connect an XLR microphone to the Streamer X. This will give you much better audio into Zoom compared to using a laptop microphone or a headset. Next, you'll need two USB cables. Connect USB 1 from the Streamer X to your computer. That'll bring the video and audio into Zoom. Connect USB 2 from the Streamer X into the Director Mini. That will give a USB audio mix to the Director Mini. Audio only, no video over that second USB. I have a diagram of this whole setup, which I'll leave on the screen for a second to talk through it so you can double check your wiring. Once again, your main camera is connected to the HDMI in on the Streamer X. The HDMI output of a Streamer X goes into the Director Mini's HDMI 1. Your computer HDMI output goes into the Director Mini HDMI 2. That way it sees it as a second screen. There are two USB connections from the Streamer X. The main USB goes to your laptop, which sends audio and video, and the secondary USB from the Streamer X sends only audio into the Director Mini. And of course, your microphone goes into the XLR input on the Streamer X. Now let's move on to the configuration, starting with setting up the video in the Magewell Director Mini. I'm going to make a new source here. I'm going to bring in HDMI 2, which is my laptop screen. Now I actually don't want it to be full screen, so I'm going to shrink it down a little bit and move it over to the side. Then I can add in my camera as another video source. So I click on that little plus to add a new layer, bring in HDMI 1. I want my camera over there, but I want it cropped. So I can actually crop my camera to be just a vertical version of my face and ignore all the stuff on the sides. That way I can scale this down and bring it next to my slides. Now the black background isn't very interesting, so we can also add a new layer, which is just a picture. And I can bring in a background image here. I'll use my branding colors. I can make this full screen and then move it down to the bottom layer. And now I've got this nice side-by-side layout hooked up where I can save it and cut to it like another camera angle. This is one of the super unique features of the Director Mini, being able to do this extremely flexible side-by-side layout with multiple video sources and layers and background images. Great, and now the magic that makes this work. You'll need to download the RØDE Unify app from their website. You can use the Streamer X without the Unify app, but the Unify app is what gives you the extra flexibility and total customization options of all the audio processing in the Streamer X. Now this works the same on Windows and Mac, but I'm going to of course download the Mac version since that's the laptop I have. The reason you need to use the Unify app and not RØDE Central is that the Unify app gives you a lot more options for audio routing. Okay, so once that's installed, go ahead and open it up. We actually don't want all of these sources available, so I'm going to go ahead and just remove them all and set them up from scratch one by one. The audio sources we need are the microphone from the StreamerX, as well as one of the virtual devices from down here. I'm just going to go ahead and use chat. These are all just different labels for different virtual devices. Now we can click Finish on the channel assignment, and now we're dropped into the main Unify interface. Now we need to make two mixes. One of the mixes will be sent over USB 1 to your computer for Zoom, and the other mix will be sent to the Director Mini. For the mix 1 to your Zoom, you want to send only your microphone, but you want both your mic and the computer audio into the Director Mini. So up at the top here is where you choose the mixes that you're creating. I'm going to go ahead and click on USB 2 first, which is the mix being sent to the Director Mini. I want to make sure that both of these are turned on and at the same level. That should be the default, so nothing really to do here. The trick is that the chat mix is the one being sent to Zoom. So for that, I actually want to make sure that the microphone is enabled, but that chat is not. And you might notice it's already doing this because it knows that if you're using the chat mix for Zoom, you don't want to send the audio back into Zoom. You can also choose whether you want to hear your own voice in your headphones. If you're using headphones with the StreamerX, you can choose the headphone mix and choose whether you want your microphone to come through your headphones as well. If you want to turn that off, make sure you unlink it from the main mix first and then turn the volume down. And now you'll hear only the Zoom participants in your headphones. Now, once this is set up, we go back to Zoom and make sure Zoom is set up to use the right audio devices. So in the audio preferences, we need to set up the two audio sources. The speaker is going to be the Unified Chat, and the microphone will also be Unified Chat. That'll bring in the audio from the XLR mic on the StreamerX and use the StreamerX as the speaker, so you can hear the Zoom participants through headphones. Of course, for video, you want to make sure that the StreamerX is chosen here as well. Now, the one downside here is that it's hard to tell if it's working right unless you're actually in a Zoom meeting with somebody else on the other end actually talking. So I recommend doing a quick test with a friend to make sure it's working. What you're looking for is to make sure that Zoom's echo cancellation is not kicking in. When the person on the other side of the call is speaking, you want to make sure that their voice is not getting fed back into Zoom. Now, Zoom can deal with quite a lot of feedback, like if you're using just the laptop speakers and a laptop microphone. But it's not perfect, and actually what ends up happening is that it basically mutes you if you're causing feedback, so nobody will hear you when somebody else is talking. So if you have this audio mix set up right, you won't be sending the Zoom meeting audio back to Zoom, which means you'll have super crisp sounding audio the whole time. You will want to double check your mix in the headphones before you start going live. One thing I noticed when doing this is that there was a small glitch with the StreamerX. I don't know if it was a bug or what, but I could hear my HDMI audio coming through in the headphones. That HDMI audio is coming from the camera. So what I'm going to do is go back into the Unify app, go to the Channel Assignment tab, and bring the HDMI StreamerX back up here. Now on the Stream Mix, I'm going to go ahead and click Mute, and that'll mute it from the headphones and mute it out of the USB mix. So if we go back to USB 2, which is going to the Director Mini, you can see it's muted here and there's no more audio coming through. And that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to go into my computer's display settings here, and I'm actually going to change and stop mirroring and use the Director Mini as an external display. So now that it's set up as an external display, I can of course drag the window between the main display and the Director Mini. The reason I like to do this is because then in Keynote can actually use the external display as a full screen projector. So I can play that slideshow and the full slide show up over here, and I get the presenter notes. So when I'm ready to start the Zoom presentation, I can share my screen, and I'm going to share Desktop 2, which is the full screen of the Director Mini that's going to the Director Mini. So I share that, and now whatever I see over here is being shared into Zoom, which means, again, when I start my Keynote slideshow, my slides are what's showing up in Zoom, not my main screen with the presenter notes or the participant list. So now we can see that Zoom is set up correctly. I'm sharing my full camera feed into Zoom by itself, and I'm actually screen sharing my second display into the Zoom meeting. So on the Director Mini, I actually want to now choose this layout that I've created as the program, and this is what I can record or actually even live stream. The last thing you need to do is set up the audio mix in the Magewell Director Mini itself. Tap here to go to the little audio setup menu, and we actually only want the USB audio on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this to always off. I'm going to turn the microphone off, and I'm going to turn USB audio on. This is the mix coming from the RØDE Streamer X, which has both the microphone that I'm using in Zoom, as well as the computer audio from Zoom. This makes sure that what you're recording is everything you're hearing, both yourself as well as your Zoom participants. So when I'm ready to actually record, I can just go ahead and press the record button on the Director Mini, and now the whole presentation is being recorded with this nice layout, while the Zoom participants are seeing what they should. So instead of your Zoom recordings looking like this, they now look like this, which is a much more professional result. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned a tip about how to record the other people in your Zoom meeting. Well, if you noticed, you've already got the audio set up for that. So now it's just a matter of capturing the Zoom window in the Director Mini. The reason the audio is already set up is because the audio mix that you're sending from the StreamerX into the Director Mini contains both your microphone as well as what you're hearing in the Zoom meeting. And Zoom is already canceling out your microphone from what you hear. So for capturing the video, I like to put my Zoom into dual screen mode. Of course, first set your computer to extend the display so that this shows up as a second monitor, but in Zoom there's an option called Use Dual Monitors. That gives you this extra window you can drag around, either on your main screen or drag it over to the Director Mini. If you make this full screen, it looks like a full screen copy of whatever's showing up in Zoom, and now whoever is the active speaker in Zoom will show up over here. So I've joined a third participant to the call with my phone, so if I switch to speaking through my phone, you can see Zoom is just auto-switching to the active speaker. And then it should switch back to Greta over there. And that's it. I'll leave links to everything I used in this video down below. And comment down below if you managed to get this all set up. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.